Hi everybody, and welcome to the, I think, third webinar, trying to give you guidance and some help during this difficult time. My name is Lee Manning, one of the partners at Raffingers, and today I'm trying to concentrate on the job retention scheme and the furlough guidance. I've got some help from one of my partners, Paul, and I'll explain how he can help you with some Q&A as we go through the presentation. So the webinar that we held on Friday generated, I think it was about, well, the last count was about 110 questions. So I found that quite challenging to answer all the questions whilst doing the presentation. So Paul's going to help me with that. And we were just having a chat just now, and it seemed like it was weeks ago that the announcement regarding the self-employed was released, and it was actually Thursday evening, and the days feel like weeks at the moment. So hopefully we've covered a lot of the new guidance and the detail that was announced on Thursday night regarding furloughing your employees. So bear with me, the presentation is only going to last about 20 minutes. We're going to try and leave some room at the end for some questions that you guys might have, that I can answer them as I go through, maybe where Paul can't keep up with all the questions. So this is a bit of housekeeping. So the housekeeping, so if you can click on the Q&A button that you should see on the screen and write your questions, or cut and paste it. I know quite a few people have emailed us this morning. So if you can just maybe cut and paste that email into the Q&A, then Paul will gladly answer those as much as he can. I think he's got a harder job than me, because I'm just going to read out the presentation and just give you some guidance as we go through it, but he's actually going to answer some of the real nitty-gritty questions that I know a lot of you have got. And if you see the same question come up, please don't repeat the question, because it's quite annoying. If you can just click on the thumbs up icon, which has been beautifully arrowed on the presentation, then that sort of goes up the list on the Q&A portal, and then Paul can answer them as we go through. So very quick overview. I'm sure you all know exactly what the furlough is about. It's maybe the detail that you're having issues with, but the furlough was meant to continue paying part of the employee's salary for an employee that's been designated as a furlough worker. Grants applies to all UK businesses, charities and not-for-profit, and it was backdated to the 1st of March, initially running for a 3-month period to the end of May. As we go through the presentation, I'll talk about how the 1st of March date works. I'm getting quite a few people asking me, can we backdate the furlough? And I'll explain how that works later on. And it is now being confirmed that you've got to be employed or engaged at the time of the announcement on 20th March and on the payroll at the end of February, New Year's, the leap year day, 29th of February. Employers would be put workers on temporary leave, and the HMRC will pay employers a grant worth 80% of the employee's usual costs, up to £2,500 a month. Now, this is a major change. Initially, when this was announced, we all thought it was just gross pay and would not include national insurance and pension. But as we saw from the detail Thursday night, it will now include the employer's national insurance and the auto-enrolment, the pension for contribution by the employer. So that's changed slightly. And the system, again, a lot of people asking about the system. When will it be up and running from HMRC? We have been told the end of April. However, I can't believe that the systems that would normally take years to implement and put through and be tested will take, I think it will be 6 weeks since they announced this help. So full fingers crossed it will be April, but who knows what's going to happen. I think the crunch will come when all you guys need to pay your furloughed employees the end of April, not knowing when the rebate is going to come through. We'll have to cross that bridge as we come to it. However, they're working day and night to get it up and running by then. And confirm that individuals will pay income tax and national insurance. So yes, this was another question that someone asked me, that you will still need to pay the PAYE and employees NI on these payments. A lot of people are now obviously deferring their tax payments to HMRC, and this will be another deferment in relation, in addition to your VAT and maybe your corporation tax, you need to maybe defer your PAYE contributions. Obviously, these contributions, these payments need to be made towards the end of the year. So obviously try and put some money aside if you can. Easier said than done, to cover the PAYE that will need to be paid later on in the year. So this is the maximum grant. It's 80% of an employer's regular wage, or £2,500 per month. As I said, that now includes the employer's national insurance and the pension payment. Again, very, very clear from the guidance issued Thursday night that the fees, any fees, commission and bonuses should not be included in that gross wage calculation. So I know a lot of recruitment agents pay their commissions on a regular basis, so you need to exclude your commissions when you're doing your calculation. So the maximum cap that an employer can receive will be £2,500, which is the grant, the rebate, plus 245 quid the employer's NI, and the 59 quid employer's NI. So you will get a total grant of £2,800 per employee. Now, this is a really nice example that breaks it down, and it's all quite clear once you run through the example. And this has been published by the Institute of Chartered Accountants, so a lot of people are following this as an example. So someone's on a 24 grand salary, £2 a month, and he's opted out of auto enrolment. So the net that they pay the net pay that the employee will get would be £1,655 after deducting PAYE and NI. And then the employer's NI is £177 on the £2,000. So the maximum amount is 80% of £2,000 and £2,500 plus employer's NI on this amount. So X Limited will get a grant of 1,600 quid because it's lower than £2,500 plus the £177 employer's NIC back. So he will get 1,777 back. So the net amount of cash that X Limited needs to pay Mr. A, if that employee is being furloughed on maintaining existing salary, that's important. He's continued to pay the 100%. He's not paying him 80%. And I'll talk about paying 80% shortly, but he's decided to pay him the full salary of £2,000. So the cost to the company will be £2,000 plus the national insurance, and he's going to get back 1,077 back as shown above here. So he's going to get 1,077 there. So the cost to him, to the employer, is £400 per month. So you just got to bear that in mind. So if you've got obviously 10 employees earning a similar amount and you pay them all 100%, it's going to cost you £4,000 per month after obviously you get your rebate back. When you get your rebate back, who knows, hopefully April, May. So this is a matter of employment law, whether the employer is actually required to pay this top up. Employers can agree to a different arrangement during the furlough. So again, this is really important, and I will talk about this in future slides. So what we've decided to do, which is quite nice, we've broken down sort of 4 different case studies or examples of paying furloughed employees. So yeah, you can see the £2,000 gross salary per the example before, cost to employers 400 quid. And then what we've tried to do is break it down to the employers paying the full salary there at different levels. And you can see that here he's hit the maximum rebate that they can get. So no matter what salary they're on, 3,125 or 3.5, they're going to get the same rebate back. And you can see that the cost of employers obviously going to keep increasing as the gross salary increases. So what's quite interesting is the table below, where the employer has reduced the salary to 80% to the employee. And you can see in green the reduced salary to 80% and what the effect is going forward. And as you can see, up to 3,125, they're going to get the maximum grant back, no cost to the employer. And as you can see, as they start going above that limit, £3,500, the cost to employers is 350 quid after the rebate. And obviously, as the salary, the gross salary gets bigger and bigger, obviously the cost to employer is going to get bigger and bigger. So we're having quite a lot of clients sort of having a bit of a dilemma whether to pay the 100% or 80%. So what I have discovered, speaking to a huge amount of clients, as you can imagine, that for March, a lot of people paid the 100%. So because it was sort of 3 weeks at full pay, and it was only really the last week, 10 days, that it all sort of going a bit pear-shaped. But a lot of people decided, right, we're going to pay 100%. Going forward to April or May, different story. I have got maybe 90% of clients have agreed, and this is really important, and again, I'll talk about this later on, but they have agreed with the employee to pay them 80% of their salary. They feel that the employee needs to take some of the brunt of this. There's going to be a lot less travel costs going to work, a lot less spending money on lunches, and loads of things like that, that they feel that the employee needs to take some of the strain, because the employer, the business, is going to find it very difficult to recover any of the monies, especially when it comes to the end of April, when obviously all these furloughed guys need to be paid. And I think there was a great article, I think on Friday, the owner of Wetherspoons initially decided not to pay his employees until he got the rebate. And obviously the press found out, and I think towards the end of the day, he actually changed his mind, because he realized from an employment law point of view, he just could not do that without all thousands of their employees agreeing to obviously not being paid. So there was a whole employment issue that you guys need to be aware of if you take that attitude, and must get HR or employment law advice. So that was quite an interesting example, how it will affect you as a business. So the process, this is really important as well. You've got to get the process right. If you get the process wrong, or you don't get the right paperwork in place or the right agreement signed, then you're going to have an issue when HMRC look into the rebates in more detail. I would imagine that once this is all settled down, they're going to have some audits. They will undertake some audits. They'll check some of the, maybe random check some of the claims. So you need to make sure your evidence is in place. So the process, where no work is available for one or more members of staff, and there is no contractual right to lay staff off, our view is that employers should immediately consult with a view to affected staff are going to become furloughed. Most contracts of employment would not have a contractual right to lay staff off. Some do. Normally zero-rated contracts would have that. Maybe temp contracts of employment would have that, but mainly your normal full-time staff would not have a contractual right to lay staff off. If it does, great. You don't need to do much. They don't even need to sign anything because it's in their contract, but you should maybe just check as a point of call that if your contract has that or not. So number 2 is really, really important. You've got to agree with your employees that you're going to furlough them, and that you're going to maybe reduce their salary down to 80%. All right. So you need to, so if agreement is not reached, employers should take immediate legal advice. If agreement is reached, go to 3 below. So number 2, if agreement is not reached. So what would happen if your employee turns around and says, no, I don't want to be furloughed, and I don't agree to being furloughed, I want to continue working? The employer would obviously have an argument to say there's no work, I need to furlough you, or I'm going to make you redundant. So basically, it's as clear as that. You either furlough that employee because there's no work, or you make them redundant. So I think once you speak to your employees in those terms, I think they then get it. Or you turn around and say, I'm going to reduce your hours. Okay, I've got a bit of work where you was full time. I've now got 1 day a week's worth of work for you. I need to vary your contract. I'm going to pay you 1/5 of what I was normally paying you. Again, the employee, I don't think would agree to that. I'd be amazed if they did, because they're obviously going to be worse off than if they were furloughed. So you've got to get, if your agreement is not reached and you're having a dispute with the employee, get legal advice, because now you're varying the terms of the employment contract, and you would need to make sure you're covered from an employment law point of view. So number 3, so we believe the next applicable step will be that employers should write to each worker, confirm they are furloughed. We've got templates. We've sent you loads of templates already. So the templated letter asks or insists that the employee signs the letter to confirm they've agreed the terms and are aware of what they're being paid, whether it's the 100% or the 80%. Employee, so number 4, we believe the letter should confirm that each will receive 80% of their salary up to per month, or the 100% if you are paying the 100%. The gross amount of pay, the amount of pay per month should be set out in the letter, and it should be made that it's very clear that it's made under the coronavirus job retention scheme and subject to change depending upon the rules of that scheme and the interpretation of the scheme as clarity emerges. And that prime example is that on Thursday we didn't know what the detail was, and now we do, and I'm sure as more examples come out there's going to be further changes to the legislation. So number 5, right, this is the important part. Number 5, we don't know when the software is up and running to submit the information to HMRC telling them that the staff have been furloughed. The online portal should be available towards the end of the month. Now, if you're running payroll, or if we're running the payroll for you, you should notify us that those employees are being furloughed, and we've created a new section on the pay slip to confirm they are furloughed and the amount that's being information, obviously when we need to submit the claims when the software is up and running. And obviously employers should then start to pay staff in accordance with the arrangements. So if you have cut them to 80%, you pay them 80%, pay them 100%, you should pay them 100%. You should pay them at the end of the month, at the end of April. To defer paying them until you get your rebate, very dangerous ground. Again, you should take employment law advice. So this is just a standard slide. All UK-wide employers with a PAYE scheme are eligible. Businesses, charities, recruitment agencies, and the employer obviously must have a UK bank account. What employees can I claim for? So this is quite interesting. It's got to be on your payroll on the 28th/29th of Feb and can be at any type. So full-time, part-time, employees on agency contracts, employees on flexible or 0-hour contracts are now part of the scheme. At one time we weren't sure if the 0-hour contract guys were on there and how their employees were going to be calculated, how the rebate was going to be calculated, where you had varying rates of pay for part-time and seasonal workers, which I will talk about on the slide later on. What employees can I claim for? So this is where the 1st of March date comes in. So there have, and I've seen instances where some businesses made employees redundant on the 1st of March. When they saw this was happening, they might have made them redundant to try and keep a lid on some of the costs that were going through. So the idea was that it went backdated to the 1st of March, so you can rehire those employees that you made redundant and then put them on furlough from the 1st of March. It doesn't mean that if you've made them furloughed today, that you go back and backdate it to the 1st of March. You can't do that. So the furlough is, because obviously they were working from the 1st of March. So that 1st of March date was important for those guys that have already been made redundant at that date to be rehired. To be eligible for the subsidy, an employee cannot undertake work for or on behalf of the organisation. So this is really important. You cannot do any work whatsoever. So it's basically where the business is shut or the person is not able to work from home. In the construction trade, obviously they're not going to be able to work from home, very difficult. So they're being furloughed and they can obviously claim the 80% or 100% the company. Again, it makes it very clear, 3rd paragraph, if an employee is working on reduced hours, they're not eligible for the scheme. You have to continue paying that employee as per normal through the payroll and pay their salary subject to the employment contract you have agreed on the new reduced hours. So be very, very careful there. It's really all or nothing. It's all working part-time, doing some work, sort of filling your week, or nothing at all, furloughed, not working. So be very, very clear. It is quite clear how that works. So just watch that, and you don't want to be caught out by HMRC later on. Also getting quite a few clients and businesses asking how the HMRC are going to police this. Are they going to check every phone call, every email that the employee is doing? If they are at home and maybe have made that odd phone call or dealt with the odd email from a client, I have no idea how HMRC are going to police this. I would imagine when you submit your rebate online, there will be a massive disclaimer saying you have acted legally within the regulations, and I would imagine it would say that if HMRC have do an audit and find that you've, I don't know, claimed by mistake or fraudulently, that there will be huge penalties and stuff like that. So we don't know the detail of that, and I don't think the detail will be available until you actually do the rebate. So, but just watch that, and I'm advising clients, look, it's down to you. You're responsible for claiming the rebate, not us. So you just make sure you comply with the legislation as it is. So that's all talking about in discussing with your staff, making any changes to employment contract, that you have to be in agreement with them. You can't just blanket say, right, you're all on 80%, lump it or leave it. You've got to agree with them, and they've got to sign it. Otherwise, you really are treading on dangerous ground with employment law. You don't need to place all your, right, so this is quite important. You don't have to do all your employees on furlough. So you can choose and pick who you want to put on furlough. The criteria would normally be based on skill, based on experience, based on workload. So you've got to make a judgment. But the only thing I would say is make sure you evidence your judgment, evidence how you came to that decision, because what you don't want to do is then have an employment law issue or disciplinary issue or a tribunal issue later on down the road. So just make sure you document all your thought processes to cover yourself. Right, what about staff who have been dismissed prior to the scheme being active? We've talked about that, so you can rehire them back if you want to. This is quite also interesting. Martin Lewis, a lot of questions. I was listening to him the other night. A lot of people are which is really unfortunate, between jobs, where someone has left employment, say the end of Feb, middle of Feb, and haven't started their new job yet. So they're sort of in between payrolls. His advice was to go back to your previous employer and ask to be rehired, which I think is going to be easier said than done if you've left under a cloud or not on good terms. And the idea is that they rehire you back and furlough you. And obviously they've got an issue because they've obviously got to fund your salary, knowing that you've left and want to leave for the time being until this all gets resolved. So unfortunately, those people in between jobs are going to find this really difficult. And I think it's just bad luck and bad timing. And I can't see how you would get around the problem of trying to get some money back. Is the employee obligated to make up the 20%? No, you do not have to pay the extra 20%. So that is up to you. It's optional whether you want to pay the 20% or pay the 80%. This is a great one. Again, this was only, I think, leaked Friday. I think it was Friday night, Thursday night as well, regarding owner-managed businesses, company directors. So company directors are entitled to claim 80% of their salary. However, dividends will not be included in calculating the amount that they will pay. And as you can see, I've made it double clear. I've put it at the bottom as well. Dividends are not included in the rebate. So therefore, unfortunately, where dividend planning and was helpful when the companies were trading, having a small salary up to your personal allowance and taking the difference by a dividend was good tax planning. Now is not so good under this scheme. So you're going to just get about 80% of your salary. Dividends will not be included unless there's any changes in the legislation. If there is, you will hear about it first from us. At the moment, dividends are not included. So directors must follow the same rules. So you cannot do any work for the company during the period in which a claim is made. However, it was, I think, over the weekend said that company directors can undertake their company director duties and still be able to be furloughed. So company duties means filing accounts, filing returns, keeping the company alive, doing the best to keep the company trading. They're all sort of duties of a company director as opposed to employee. You can do that bit of work, that's fine, but you can't be going out, I don't know, doing your day-to-day job, recruitment, if you're recruitment, making phone calls, doing interviews, that type of thing is not allowed. There'll be more, I think today they said that there'll be more guidance of what directors can and cannot do, and there should be examples of what that includes. So maybe look out for that. But the good news is that at least you'll get something back under the furlough scheme. And obviously they have to close their business down, really, because you shouldn't be trading. Can employees bring staff into the scheme who are already on sick leave or receive an SSP due to self-isolation? So if you're on sick leave or self-isolating, they will get SSP, but they can be furloughed after this. So they can be furloughed after they've come off statutory sick pay. If they've come back after their 2-week isolation, then they can go through the furlough scheme and get obviously their funding from there. Right, this is a great question. Maternity leave, adoption pay, paternity pay, or shared paternity pay. This is quite a long slide. It's a bit boring, so I won't go into too much detail, but there's a lot of facts in there. But if you're on maternity leave, there's a whole raft of things that you need to comply with regarding SMP. So maybe have a look at that in a little bit more detail if that does apply to you on maternity leave for your employees. Right, again, I can't stress this enough, that employees should not undertake any work for the employer while they are furloughed to enable them to claim up the 80% or the 100%. Right, so it was really the second paragraph that's important. So furloughed employees can take part in volunteer work or training. So they can go off and do some volunteering work, and they can continue to do in-house training whilst being furloughed, which is quite handy if you are doing some training sessions or to improve the skills of your employees. Obviously, there's a big caveat that as long as it does not provide services to or generate revenue for on behalf of your organisation, which is quite important. So you can do online training courses whilst they're furloughed. Also, another question we get up, which is sort of highlighted there, that the national minimum wage, if someone's being paid the national minimum wage and then you apply the 80% to that, can you do that? Can you pay them below the national minimum wage? And you can. So we've seen articles and we've seen people comment that, yeah, you can pay 80% of the national minimum wage. Again, another one, I got this, I think I actually got this wrong last week. I thought it would be 2.5 grand in total, no matter how many jobs. But again, the detail came out Thursday night and it said you can have, if you've got more than one job, you can be furloughed for each job. So each job is separate and the cap applies to each employer individually. So that's quite interesting. So some people have got a few other jobs, you can get it per job. It's not in total. So that's worth knowing and maybe helping your employees answer that question. Again, another great question here. Can employees be moved in and out of furlough? Yes, they can. The scheme has been designed to allow for flexibility so they can be brought back to work. As hopefully we get out of this soon, that you start then generating some work and you need to bring them back, you are able to bring them back. However, the guidance and the legislation at the moment says that they must remain on furlough for a minimum period of 3 weeks. Although a further period may immediately follow the previous furlough if agreed. So this will ensure flexibility and permit furloughed employees being brought to cover, for example, sickness of others. So it's quite important that this 3-week minimum period, and I would imagine the 3-week minimum period must be 3 weeks in a row. I'm not sure, it's not again very clear if it's 1 week furlough, come back for the second week, 1 week furlough, come back the second week. I think it's got to be 3 weeks in a row. And then you can then think about bringing employees back. But again, we shall see when the legislation's actually put in place whether how the 3-week will works. This is another great question, and this again the guidance has helped with this. 0-hour seasonal workers. So you've got to do a bit of a calculation here, because obviously at the 29th of Feb 19, their hours could be completely out of kilter of what they're actually doing if they're maybe busy in the summer, and February they were not doing anything. So there's a calculation here. So to work out the grant, that you've got to take the higher of their earnings in the same pay period in the previous year. So you look back to Feb Feb 19, and the average earnings in the whole previous 12 months. Obviously, if they've worked less than 12 months, you take the number of months they've worked. Half months can be included in the calculations. So it'll be of those two. So you need to work that calculation out. I'd imagine the average earning, but that's the calculation to work out how the gross pay for those guys on 0 hours and certain seasonal workers. We know about the rest of the 2 items on that. So can employees staying at home to look after young children placed on furlough? You can tell I'm already had enough of this bloody word. Anyway, so furlough. Employees staying at home to look after young children are thought to be included in the furlough system in preference to be made redundant. The whole point of this furlough system is instead of making somebody redundant, which would have happened without this scheme, you put them on the furlough system because obviously you want them to come back to work once everything picks up. So yes, you can put them on furlough. Talked about the SMP, that horrible slide with all those facts and figures, which was really boring. So I won't cover that. And we've talked about enhanced contractual rights and can be claimed through the scheme. So furlough letters, really important. You should, where possible, get your employment solicitor or an HR specialist to please just double check your furlough letter and making sure you're implementing it properly. You really don't want to get caught up in employment legislation when this all settles down. I can see another PPI thing looming once some of these ambulance solicitors, ambulance chasers start coming after companies, but just put things in place now so you don't fall foul of any employment law. And there's some pointers what should be included in your letter, which I've sort of covered in the previous letter, previous slides. We have got a template if you would like it, or if you haven't already got it, just email myself, Ashley, or through the system, and then we'll get those letters to you to then use as a template and then for you to get them double checked. Right, so this could be quite useful for you guys. So for existing clients of Raffingers, part of our contract is that we've got access to an HR specialist, Gary Hilton from Peninsula, who will be able to help with general queries. So we've spoken, one of the partners spoke to him today, and he's quite happy to help with any general inquiries, general questions that you might have. Anything that are really more detailed, they're obviously going to charge you and quote you for any in-depth work on the back of it, but it's quite nice that you've got somebody from HR who can then give you a lot of advice, the more detailed advice that we're just not able to give you. The basics is when you get into the real nitty-gritty and specific examples within your business. I know recruitment companies are having a bit of a nightmare with temp payrolls and umbrella companies, who's responsible for what. So it can get a little bit complicated. So those guys will be able to help you. So that was a very quick run summary of where we are. It took half an hour, 10 minutes, a bit longer than I thought. Hopefully I've answered a lot of the questions, the common questions that we get asked as we're trying to help people go through this furlough system. I know Paul's been firing away on the Q&A. Hopefully he's covered a lot of them. I'm just going to check regarding on my chat, see if anyone's got some questions that I can answer before I sort of bring this presentation to end. You talk about monthly paid staff. What about weekly paid staff? So the same principle would apply. You've got to pay them weekly. You've got to work out the 80% of their weekly up to a cap of £2.5 a month. So I'd imagine you've got to work out the £2.5 cap per month times 12 divided by 52 will give you a weekly cap, and run the payroll as per normal. So that, I think, how the same rules apply for the weeklies as it would do for the monthlies. Just going to jump on the Q&A. I think, well done, Paul, you've answered 37. What about the 21 that you haven't answered? What's going on? Anyway, so let me just quickly go through. I'm going to go to the bottom and see if there's any that I can answer now. To stop Paul. What happens after the end of May? Great question. So they have said that they will extend it. If nothing has improved, they have the ability to extend the furlough. I would hope, and we would all hope, that the HMR software is up and running and the rebates are coming in by the end of May. If not, I think we're all going to have some issues. You try and get one of these sort of guaranteed loans that are flying around. It's easier said than done. Let's hope by the end of May that happens and the system's up and running. So hopefully that's answered your question, Daniel. As a charity, can furloughed employees continue to do certain tasks in voluntary capacity, phoning clients and offering support? No, I don't think they can. As far as I can see, as in the example, that if you furloughed them, they just cannot work. They're not meant to do any work whatsoever. So I don't think they're allowed to do that. That's my understanding of the rule. It's either working or not working. If they are working, then you've got to reduce their hours. So I'm thinking of my business manager who runs payroll and looks after banking, etc. Can I continue to pay him, as otherwise he can't work at all? Now, I had that conversation again, and I got a feeling that unless you reduce their hours, if you reduce their hours, fine, they can obviously continue working, but if you furlough them, they're not meant to do any work. So I think it's then down to the director to then come in and take over dealing with the bankings, running, maybe getting the accountant or the payroll company to run the payroll. So I think you've got to be really careful. I think it's on dangerous ground, continue to pay those guys under furlough. So an employee can be furloughed by more than one employer, yes. So a temp working for several agencies could be furloughed by all of agents, yes, 100%. That was in the presentation. You can furlough more than, if you've got more than one job. Do freelancers utilising their own company qualify? Yes. So owner managed businesses, that was covered in the slides. Owner managed businesses, as long as you're on the payroll, yeah, then you can qualify 80% of your salary if it's your own company. But you've obviously got to not be working. So if it's your own and you're still doing bits and bobs, you're not going to qualify. But apart from, if you've stopped working, there's no work out there, yes, you can qualify as the owner, manager, director. So what do we pay? So what do we pay staff who work different hours each month? Right. So that was covered in the slide regarding averaging. So if it's oh, I've lost it. Different hours, yep. So varying hours, seasonal, zero workers. You've got that calculation in there. You go back previous 12 months, you take the average, or you go back to the payroll this time last year, whichever is the higher. Right, can we defer PAY and corp tax payments to HMRC? If so, for how long? Right, so yes, you can. You must phone HMRC. It's not an automatic deferral like VAT has been agreed. VAT has been deferred. You do not need to phone them up to defer your VAT payment, but you do need to on PAY and corp tax. So you need to phone them up, get a payment plan put in place, and which will stop any sort of interest and penalties. Otherwise, they'll still chase you and they'll still come after you for interest and penalties. Good luck getting through to HMRC. It will take you 2 or 3 hours to get through. They're on sort of skeleton staff as well, but it's worth persevering and trying to get that sorted. So Stuart, I hope you're doing all right, Stuart. I can only employ one person. I only employ one person. Can I defer the furlough to 1st of May? Yes, so I can give him work over the next month and I'm happy to continue paying. Yeah, 100%. You can furlough anybody, you can furlough whenever you want. So you can furlough them today, you can furlough them in 2 weeks' time. Obviously the minimum of 3 weeks. So you've got to keep them off work for 3 weeks, then bring them back. But yeah, you can choose as and when you want to do it as the work maybe dries up and then bring them back. On that, I don't know how that would work if you furloughed them for 3 weeks and then within a week, business picks up and you've got work to do and then you bring them back. I would imagine HMRC will turn around and say, look, you haven't done it for a minimum of 3 weeks. then you're not going to get the rebate. But how they're going to check that and enforce that and look, I have no idea, but that's what you should be doing. Crikey, they're all coming in thick and fast now. Where were some of these? Oh, where was Stuart's? So, right, so a couple of others. So I've got maybe 5 minutes. So a company director with low salary and receiving dividends, can I raise my salary and then furlough myself? Right, so they're going to take the payroll run at the end of Feb, and they will check the history and the trend. So if you've been paying yourself £850 a month, whatever that the minimum figure is to cover your personal allowance, every month until February, and then all of a sudden you give yourself £3,125, I think that will flag, massive red flag HMRC, and they will then, I would imagine, will refuse the claim in total. We've also got to file an amended RTI, the monthly payroll return to HMRC, another flag to them that the payroll has been amended. So my advice would be, it's not worth it. It really isn't. I have had instances where they genuinely have put somebody on the payroll late because they were waiting for a P45 or waiting for the some documents or whatever, or there was a delay putting them on the payroll to the end of Feb. That's fine, because obviously there's no history leading up to that. Just be really, really careful with that. I personally wouldn't do it. And I don't think anyone should be going back and revising our submissions from previous months. Someone's clearing these as I'm doing that. How efficient. Right, so if you work, so this is anonymous, nice name, anonymous attendee. If you work in the estate agency property market where the government have told people not to move property, their ability to do their job and earn commissions has been taken away as nothing is happening. Is there any, no, there's no further dispensation from the government to cover people in this sector whatsoever. So to help the employees, they need to then apply for universal credit to make up some of the shortfall. And you can, I have seen articles as well on this, you can apply for universal credit and also get the furlough. So if your circumstances, you meet the criteria for universal credit, you might as well try and apply for that at the same time. Oh, Anne-Marie, thank you. I saw your email before and I don't know what the answer was on this. We run 2 payrolls, one every 4 weeks for candidates and one monthly for office staff. If we can only submit every 3 weeks. Right, so the every 3 weeks, that 3 weeks furloughing is more the process of actually furloughing them. You still would run your payroll as normal. You would still submit your 4 weekly payroll and your monthly payroll to HMRC. Just obviously make that decision whether you're paying them 100% or 80%. So the 3 weeks rule is not really applicable when running your payroll. Right. I'm nearly getting to the bottom. Every time I get to the bottom, then a few more questions pop up. So Paula's advice. Oh, okay. I'm not going to start querying Paul's advice. You're having a laugh. Oh, I'll come back to yours, Linda. That's quite complicated. Right. I'm usually it's important if self-employment scheme financially preferable not to be furloughed. Yeah, the self-employment scheme and this scheme are completely separate. They're not linked whatsoever. So you do need to look at that if you've got self-employed guys working for you. They're completely different schemes and rules are completely different. So Fred, director on basic salary, which most directors are, will the PAYE 80% payments be made automatically or do we need to apply? Will they be made from the date you send the furlough email to yourself? Yes. So if you're furloughing yourself today because your business is shut today, you're only going to be entitled to the grant from today onwards, and you've got to pay yourself salary at the end of the month as you normally would, and obviously get the rebate, the 80%, once the software is up and running, and HMRC can hopefully pay you back into your bank account. I don't know, John. That's a great question, John. If a furloughed employee receives an email, are they able to forward it to non-furloughed employees to action? I would imagine so. I can't believe, and I keep saying this, I can't believe they're going to police it to that nth degree. I really don't. I think it's where, and I think that's obvious, that they're not working and they're not generating revenue for the business. They're not working with the company. I think that's sort of, the rules are there to stop people really abusing the system. So I think I'm actually finished a lot of, I've got a couple of in the chat. Let me just go into the chat and see. I think I've got other questions in there as well. So let me just fire these back if they need to be talked about. Would a salesman be paid 8% basic and commission? No, it is only 80% basic. There's no commission calculated in the gross pay calculation. So just the gross, exclude commission, exclude bonuses. Can we offer less than 80% on the understanding that we'll make up the difference when we get the rebate? Again, right, so now you're treading on dangerous grounds because you are burying the contract of employment with the employee. You have to get their agreement, and I would get that agreement in writing that they have agreed to take a salary less than 80%. If they don't agree it, then the only alternative you've got is to go through the redundancy process. So you can, but I have had people say that they were going to 80%, give them a 20% pay cut towards the end of the year as things, they'll review the bonus system, maybe repay employees as a bonus for sort of helping them through this difficult period. So bonuses maybe could be a good way to recompense those employees where you have given them a 20% pay cut or more than that. I've just registered the company for PAYE and we're waiting verification to arrive only this week. Can you still furlough their employees? No, you cannot, because they weren't employed with you at the end of Feb. Unfortunately, it's too late. You needed to obviously have a payroll scheme up and running at the end of Feb to comply with the furlough rules. I don't think you can furlough their employees. Oh, thank you, Malcolm. I was going to say that. Yes, commission is excluded from the calcs, but how do we pay commission legitimately due after furlough? That's a great question. You would have to put it on the first pay run. You would have to put it on the first pay run after furlough if they due any commissions. So that's cleared a lot in the chat, which is really cool. I think what's the time now? 1:45. I think if people are willing to sort of hang on, I don't mind carrying on. Still got quite a few people hanging in there, obviously looking at some of these new questions that are coming through. I think sometimes it's the actual questions that are quite more interesting than my PowerPoint presentation. I know I have to go through the detail, but it's just the detail that people are looking for and want that advice, maybe just someone to speak to. So I will carry on just clearing some of these, and I don't know where Paul is up to. He's answered 52. God, well done, Paul. Only 41 to open to go. An employee, oh, this is a lovely question here. An employee increased their hours salary with effect from 1st of March. Furlough figures will be calculated at 29th of Feb. Correct. They worked 2 weeks at a high rate before their work stopped. We were to pay the extra 20%. Do we have to pay the new figure? So it's going to be your payroll at the end of Feb. So they're using that payroll run as your furlough figure, as your gross salaries. So whatever you pay them the end of Feb, then that's the figure that you should be working your calculations out on. So need to know about cutting off emails and company mobiles. Do we need to do this for furlough payments? No. Again, I think that's too extreme. I think if you put an out of office on your emails and maybe messages on your company mobiles, I think that is enough. And your message will be that we've closed business, leave a message and we'll get back to you. I think will be enough evidence to show that you have stopped working. Company secretary, can they do their duty while furloughed? I don't know who has company secretaries anymore. I'm assuming you mean by the Companies Act, company secretary. So yeah, they've still got duties if you still have company secretaries. Again, I think the same with the directors, they've still got to do their company duties, their company secretary work whilst they're being furloughed. So yes, I think that will be okay. All right, so we've covered that one about commissions. Right, so charities is really complicated. It's not complicated, but it's just hard to give advice on the charities. I would definitely speak to the guys from Peninsula on that, and to find out exactly what you can and can't do. It's really hard, because I'd imagine as a director of a charity, you could still do annual returns, processing wages and stuff, and still be furloughed. I think that would be okay. Again, I'll be quite interested, I think, when the detail comes out, whether that is sufficient. What determines a temporary worker as being furloughed? If the client has terminated the assignment, there's no guarantee of returning. What determines as being furloughed? If the client has terminated the assignment and there's no guarantee, right? Mate, I think they're being made redundant. If temporary workers been furloughed and the client has terminated them back, what's the point of furloughing them? Because someone's going to have to pay and fund their furlough payments until you get the rebate. If there's no guarantee of work afterwards, they're being made redundant. As simple as that. And you've got to then follow the redundancy process, obviously with help from your HR. So if an employee rejects the furlough scheme and elects to be made redundant, yes, normal redundancy rules follow. Notice pay, everything, consultation periods, everything as per normal, if they do not accept the furlough. Yeah, because if it wasn't for furlough, they would be made redundant. So you've got to follow that scheme as if the furlough wasn't around. I haven't been working for a few weeks now. Can I backdate my furlough? No, you cannot. Well, if it's your own company, and I've had this before, if it's your own company and you've got to send yourself your own furlough letter, and you haven't been working for 2 weeks and you're just late giving yourself the letter, then yes, you would backdate that letter to when you've stopped working. The issue would be where you can't backdate it for 2 weeks or to an employee, and you know full well that they've been working beyond that date or from that date. So you just be careful. And the letter's really only there for evidence if HMRC ask for it. If it's a letter to yourself, only when HMRC need to give it, because that furlough letter doesn't get sent anywhere when you request your rebate. What figure do they take for the salary? Is it the monthly? Oh God, that just moved down. That was weird. Is it the monthly you take home or the employment income total on the self-assessment form pro rata, which also includes benefit in kind? So yes, it's just your gross pay. So it excludes any benefit in kind. Yeah, so it's just your gross salary. I had to close my CAF last week. Sorry about that, Mario. And my wife both on payroll. We're both furloughed. Do I need to contact HMRC now and let them know? No. So you don't need to let HMRC know at all. All you need to do is when you run your payroll, obviously you need to put a line in there that you've been furloughed. So you know when you come to make the claim, hopefully the end of the month, that will be the claim that HMRC will obtain to enable the rebate to be sent back to you. So at the moment, you don't need to contact HMRC. If you furlough an employee and they find a job elsewhere, that's a great question. If you furlough an employee and they find a job elsewhere, do the notice periods in their contracts apply? If they leave without notice after receiving pay, can we claim it back? Wow. Paul, can you answer Sue's question at 3:50? I have no idea. That's a great question, Paul. If not, we'll come back to you, Sue. I haven't seen that question before, and that's, yeah, that might be an employment law thing, HR thing, but I don't know. Sue, help. Paul, help even, not Sue. Oh, sorry, Francesca, I'm sorry, the sound cut out, so I didn't hear your answer on commissions due after furlough. If you could repeat it, that'd be amazing. Yes, I would imagine that if an employee's due commissions for jobs, for work done prior to going on furlough, then yes, you would pay the commissions once they've come off furlough and you're running the payroll in the normal fashion. So then you would pay them their commission. Yeah, otherwise, it states quite clearly to exclude commission when working out the gross salary or the 2,500 cap. So I'd imagine, unless Paul thinks otherwise, I'll imagine you would put your commission through once they come off furlough and you're back on the payroll as per normal. if my PA can't help, oh yes, I think somebody emailed me this morning and just didn't get around to answering it. If my PA can't help my payroll voluntary, is there an issue when we're taking her off furlough after 3 weeks days work, put her back on? No, that's fine. You can take them on and off. Yeah, exactly. I think that could be why they've done the 3 week rule, maybe for things like running payroll, running back returns, running the monthly returns. Could be why this 3 week rule, minimum 3 weeks, take them off for a day and then put them back on if there's no work after. So that would cover that. How do you treat, you ignore benefits in kind when you're working your gross salary, your gross figures out. Benefit in kind figures do not get included in your gross salary. Oh yeah, when you write your furlough letter to yourself, just file it. It doesn't get posted. Just email it to yourself and just leave it in there, ready to present if HMRC request it. Right, so what's the time? 5 more minutes and then I'll call it. How many people have we still got? Cracky, we've still got quite a few people online, 140 odd people. So I'll just crack on with you guys. Mostly no one's got anything else to do at the moment. So just listening to me, maybe it's not such a bad thing. I'm quite bored of listening to myself, but there you go. Where are we? Oh, there's loads more coming through. Guys, really, you all need to get a job. Anyway, can somebody who is currently on mat leave, oh no. I hate it when they talk about maternity leave. As you can tell, I didn't like that slide with all the details. Paul, can you do the anonymous at 352 for me? Because they're talking about SMP MAT and SMP payments. And I don't like it. So can you follow that one up? Vince, just to clarify, his question was just to go, oh, thank you. I've done that. Excellent. Right, Carol, if your company pays into private pension scheme and therefore the employer's opted out of NEST, can the company claim back any pension allowance paid? No. No. No, because that's not the auto enrolment scheme and they're paying into their private scheme. It was quite clear when the detail that it was employers, NI, and the auto enrolment pension scheme, employers' contribution. So private scheme would not cover that. And hopefully Paul might confirm that when he gets to your question. So down to Melanie's question, we pay our weekly staff an attendance bonus every week. Oh, really? If they turn up every day and on time, I understand this cannot be used for 80% payment, but it can be backdated once they are off furlough. Yeah, I think that would apply the same with the commission because they're entitled to it. It would be pretty illegal for you to then turn around and say, now you're not entitled to it. So yes, I think once they're off furlough, then it will be then put back on their payroll. Yeah, so that should be fun trying to manage the cash flow as well as paying the furlough to then manage how much bonus you need to pay once they come off furlough. So yeah, good luck with that one. Can we pay the overtime incurred in March on the April payroll with the furlough? No, I think you can't do that. Again, that's a really great question. I'm just not guessing, but logic tells me that the overtime can only be paid once they've come off furlough. Unless you work the furlough payment out on their gross salary and then you add the overtime payment. We'll come back to you. I'm sort of guessing and I don't want to give you the wrong information. So Paul, there's been quite a few questions like that about paying the overtime and bonuses later on. Can you just maybe clarify that for me, if possible? If not, if it's not now, look out for the email following this presentation and we'll try and cover that separately as well. I don't want to give you wrong information because it's quite important, obviously, when you run the April payroll, whether the overtime you're going to put on there or not and how that's going to be taxed. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how that would work. Can you make a company loan to make up the 20%? Yeah, you can. There's nothing wrong with giving the loan to the employee to make up the 20%. Obviously, that loan's repayable back to the company. If it's not, then it's taxed as normal as a salary. So just watch that. But you can lend it for the time being. great question. If someone has resigned and is on garden leave, do they qualify for furlough? So if they were on the payroll at the end of Feb, they would be entitled to it. However, they're now not working. I think you've got to continue to work. Again, Paul might be able to clarify this, but I think you've got to continue to be working, and you've got to continue to come back to be furloughed. And I think if someone's resigned, they could have resigned at the end of Feb. Paul, that's a great question as well. Do they qualify for 358 anonymous? Somebody's asked about that. If they've resigned and on gardening leave, do they qualify for furlough if they're on the payroll at the end of Feb? Something in the back of my mind is that they've got to be continuously employed going forward and have a job to come back to. If they've resigned and on gardening, there's no job for them to come back to. So I don't think you can furlough them. But again, Paul will just double check that for me. Right, a few more, then I'm going to call it a day because I've got another meeting at 4 o'clock. So may I clarify that if we furlough employees in the situation at work changes, I am all, then we can bring them off furlough until yes, yeah. So you can bring them back. So they've got to be furloughed for 3 weeks. Then you can bring them back for a day. Then you can, if the work dries up again, furlough again for 3 weeks, bring them back. Yeah. Yeah, great question, Heather. What happens if we run out of money to pay our furloughed staff before we have the refund from the government? Well, that's exactly where the Wetherspoon guy, the owner, made that decision. I think come the end of April, it's going to be very interesting, to say the least, to see if people got the funds to pay. If you've got a large payroll run to cover the April payroll run, not knowing if the scheme's not up and running, when you're going to get your rebate. So very similar to the self-employed scheme, they're not getting their rebate until the end of June. So for the next 3 months, they've got to live on thin air until they get the rebate. If you don't pay your staff, you're treading really dangerous ground with employment law. Again, you'd need to take HR advice if you can't afford to pay it. The government have then turned around and said, right, okay, now you try and get a loan, you try and increase your overdraft, you cut all your expenses to enable you to pay your staff at the end of April. Okay, easier said than done, but that's where we are about paying it. So John Hunt, very last question. I'm going to call it quits now. Yeah, the 2.5 monthly is gross. It is gross. It's not net. So it's worked out on the gross salary, whatever is the higher. If I haven't answered any of your questions, then please, by all means, if I haven't answered them, and Paul's trying to answer as many as we possibly can. And what we're trying to do is then take copies of a lot of these questions and doing a Q&A session, Q&A sort of feedback form. It's not really a feedback form, but to try and cover a lot of the questions that we haven't maybe answered through this webinar. There's so many questions, and as you can see, some of the answers I'm just not too clear on, so I need to go away and do a bit more research before I give you the correct answers. So hopefully we've covered everything. If not, I apologize. We'll cover it, or just send me an email or send Ashley an email and we'll deal with it personally. We're hoping to run another webinar this week. We're not sure if it's going to be Wednesday or Friday, so just look out for the email. Hopefully the next one's all going to be about the business loans that have been meant to be available from the banks. I'm going to go through what the criteria is, get some information of what the how the banks are treating loan applications, just give you some feedback on. I had a great question. The client phoned me in from isolation because he had actually the virus, and he said, oh, right, can I apply for the 50 grand loan? I need it next week. And I said, unfortunately, it's not that easy. It's not a matter of phoning up and getting the 50 grand the following week. There is a lot of criteria you need to go through. I will go through that in my next webinar, and maybe also just touch on time to pay with HMRC and what issues we're finding at the moment, and just giving you a bit of guidance with that. So look out for the email. Not sure if it's going to be Wednesday or Friday. It just depends on what's going on, if there's any announcements before then, but it will be one day this week, just to sort of keep you up to date with what's going on. I hope you all found it useful. By all means, email me, speak to me, give us a buzz, and hopefully try and answer a lot of questions and try and sort of guide you through this really difficult time. All keep well. Make sure you're all following the Joe Wicks 20-minute daily fitness classes. Amazing. I've learnt yoga myself for the last couple of days over the weekend. Can't move, but my posture and everything is working nicely. So hopefully you all keep safe, and hopefully speak to you soon. Thank you.